Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today we have the privilege of exploring the remarkable success story of Craige Whitton, the CEO of Northline, a prominent worldwide logistics company born right here in South Australia, who are also celebrating their 40-year anniversary this year as well. Originally from Perth, Craige's background and upbringing played a significant role in shaping his character and leadership style. He credits his father and his family values for instilling in him valuable principles and work ethics that have guided him throughout his career. So Craige's career progression is noteworthy, from CFO to CEO, showcasing his exceptional leadership skills and strategic vision. He successfully navigated the challenges posed by the global financial crisis and shared with us his ability to adapt and make sound decisions during turbulent times. When he first started with Northline, he was CFO for 4 years, and then his tenure since then has been CEO for the last 15 years, where he took the company from approximately 8 depots and 250 employees to around about 18 depots and now employs over 600 staff plus contractors. This growth is a testament to Craige's customer-centric approach, where he prioritizes building strong relationships and delivering exceptional customer experiences. So in this episode, we'll also delve into Craige's insights on change and culture and his thoughts on the importance of fostering a positive, inclusive environment for his employees where they feel valued, motivated, and contribute their best. Craige will also share his advice on navigating through the upcoming potential recession, drawing from his experience during the GFC, where he'll provide valuable insights and strategies for businesses who are looking to weather the storm and emerge stronger. So join us as we uncover the inspiring journey of Craige Whitton, CEO of Northline. So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today we have a terrific human in the form of Craige Whitton, CEO of Northline. Welcome, Craige.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
So, Craige, just a quick little background check on you. CEO of Northline, previously CFO. So you've been CEO for about 15 years or so now.
Coming up in December is the 15th anniversary. I managed to inherit the job or take over the job in December 2008, just as the GFC was starting to really hit home in Australia.
Thanks very much.
So that made for some interesting times very early on, after I'd done what we describe as a 4-year apprenticeship as the CFO when I first joined the business.
Absolutely. And long history background. We'll go into that shortly. But Northline, for those who might not know, has an international reach of over 100 or so countries, I should say. 18 depots across Australia, over 600 employees.
That's
Is
right,
that
correct.
about that?
Yep.
My research was correct.
And a whole swag of subcontractors as well.
On top of that.
Yep.
So we'll deep dive through your journey now, and I guess I always like to start this conversation with, who is Craige Whitton, and what do we need to understand about your earliest contacts to really understand the person that's sitting in front of us today?
Well, I'm originally born and bred in Perth, and have had an older sibling, an older brother who's passed away now, and I've got a younger sister who still lives in Perth with my dad. And I think growing up in Perth is just so many good memories of great weather and beaches and sunshine, and just as a kid being able to play outside and kick the football and go running or do whatever you want to do. And I think that sort of idyllic Australian lifestyle that you can remember as you were growing up is just something that's never left me. And I think it's so easy to forget how lucky we are to live not just here in Adelaide, but in Australia more broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so who was Craige growing up? Were you a little rug rat running around? Did you get into sports? I mean, and what were your parents' background? What did they do, and how did that set you up in your life?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Mum actually, who passed away from ovarian cancer about 4 years ago. Mum was actually born in India to English parents.
Okay.
So there's an Anglo-Indian background there, if you like.
Yeah.
And my most fond memories of Mum is cooking and the smell that you always have in the house of the spices that flow from that. And something like a Christmas lunch always used to involve like a roast turkey, but it always used to involve a ball curry, like a meatball curry or a lamb biryani or something like that. That involved a lot of that mix.
So when did she move to Australia?
She was about 13
Okay.
or 14, so that would have been, around about the sort of 1950s.
Yeah, so the culture was deeply ingrained in her. Then
Big time. And Mum and Dad met ballroom dancing as they were like 18 or 19, and they were together for 56 years before Mum passed away from cancer.
It's a common story. We've had a couple of ballroom dancing meet and greets back in the day. There was no technology back then, so everyone was out dancing or doing something.
No technology. The pubs were closing early and whatever else. So I think that was the way they got to meet. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah.
What did they do for a living? Were they?
So Dad was primarily in marketing. He was in sales and marketing at least. He was founder director of an advertising agency in Perth called Market Force.
Yep.
And he also was a director of a direct mail company back then, all before social media. Dad's not the social media come electronic media type. In his latter days, still working, and he worked up until he was almost 80.
Yeah, wow.
He was still having emails hard copy printed out for him that he could handwrite his responses on and then get someone to type them and send them for him. So he's not particularly savvy, Dad.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Do you think that, obviously being director, high up in roles, that had a really major influence on you and your career?
Look, it certainly helped. Dad is one of the role models that I look to. He was one of those guys, very hardworking, always very punctual, early start type of guy, but not a very late night guy. Just one of those people whose work ethic and his relationships with people were terrific, and they were the sorts of things that I took away from him, and still do today. Whenever you meet with him, he still wants to order his coffee made with feeling and love.
I love it. And your mother, she
Mum was Mum was a stay-at-home mum. She looked after the family. The three of us. In particular, we kept her busy, but she was a trained hairdresser, and she still did some of that on a part-time casual basis as we got a little bit older, and we weren't holding her back so much. So we always used to get our hairs cut for free.
By
Mum?
Yeah. What age did that stop? and were you
pretty much up till I left home.
I remember I remember my mum growing up. She thought she was a hairdresser. Your mother sounded like she was a trained. Yeah, my mother thought she was because she had a pair of clippers there, and I was rocking the flat top for a long time. Yeah,
they're not easy either. You need a bit of training to pull that off, right?
I just look like a box head. Is all I look like.
You must have some great photos as a kid then.
Yeah, they're the ones that we try to push to the back of the memory bank. So is there I think, like you mentioned it earlier, like the smells and the spices coming through. Is there a memory when you look back as a young guy coming through the ranks and a young child, teenager? Is there a memory you look back and it just makes you smile?
Look, I think I really think about the family dinner arrangement, and we always used to eat at 6 o'clock at night, and we would always come together around the dinner table and have that conversation, and that's something that my wife and I do now as much as possible as we can with our kids. We've got three sort of older kids now, sort of 15, 18 and 21.
Girls, boys?
All girls. I can only do girls.
And
I say that's elite athletes that have all girls, but I'm not quite sure of the...
I've got girls, so
it must be correct. It's not just a myth.
I'll take that.
And so we sit around the family dining table as much as we can to have conversations and to it's part of an education process of us as much as it is of them, and just talk about things. And we find that really that connection is so important. When everyone's so busy, the more often you can do that, the better.
So I did have questions later on about family and how you manage it, but while we're talking about it now, I'm interested. Do you make time for that 6 o'clock every night? Is that a religious thing for you? Is that something that you just like, this is a non-negotiable for me? I mean, obviously you're traveling a lot as well, so how do you manage that whole piece in your life?
So it's definitely a non-negotiable. The only thing that is negotiable is the time, because with 5 of us, we can't set a time and make sure that everyone's going to stick to that. We could do that back when we were young. That was much easier. But these days, with whether it's basketball training or netball training or whatever sports the kids and events and functions have got on, And we make sure we try to do it at least 3-4 nights a week as a minimum and sit down and do that. And yes, that is pretty much a non-negotiable for all of us, because then we're all together and someone's setting the table and someone's doing the dishes and whoever's cooked. Generally, my wife Justine's cooked, but as a general rule, we also try to get the kids to do their share from time to time as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're a family, right?
That's
We work as a team.
That's right. The experiments when I cook are generally not as good, or generally result in a problem that's got to be solved of some sort.
Yeah,
but
ordering takeout after.
They are the nights I cook, is the takeout nights.
So while we're talking about the family catch-ups and stuff, and how would you rank your, like, out of 10, how would you rank your availability to your family? Like, knowing that you've been a CEO for the past 15 or so years, and in this executive role for 20 plus years, is it something that you absolutely will give all your effort to?
I've been very lucky there. I run a family business effectively. Even though we run it as a corporate business, it is still, the family values still exist within our business at Northline. So I set that tone and I set that example, and that is by being part of the family at work and by making sure you look after your family at home, because you'll never be able to look after your family at work if your family at home is not right anyway. So from that perspective, I've had lots of flexibility and lots of opportunity. I've always made a point at the beginning of the calendar year, when you know whether there's a kids' sports day or there's a particular performance or some other thing, that goes in the diary straight away, and then it's sacrosanct and you can't change it. Because there's always something that comes up from a work perspective that wants to override or take over other things that you're doing. Whereas if you've got it locked in, then it can't be taken out.
Yeah.
That's been the easiest way to manage it. And whenever I travelled as the kids were younger, I always made sure I spoke to them every day, and always try and kept the number of travel nights in particular to an absolute bare minimum. These days, the kids probably not as bothered if I speak to them every day or not. But as they were growing up, it was always I always used to stop at the airport and spend $20, $30, $40 each on a gift on the way home. That in the end you get to the point where you go, geez, I can't buy too many more fluffy toys, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, setting up that routine every night, kudos to you and the family. I try to do the same thing. Sometimes late nights and network functions and all the above get in the way. So a couple of nights a week at bare minimum is absolutely important. What happens after that? How do you switch off? What do you do from a mental health perspective? Do you switch off from work? Do you stop at 8 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock at night, or do you get back on the laptop, or do you go, that's it? No, the moment I'm home, I'm father and husband.
It's nice to be able to say that in a theoretical sense, but the reality is different. You're always on.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be off, even when you're travelling overseas and in a different time zone, it's hard to be off.
Absolutely.
So it's really just making sure, and from the greatest challenge that we deal with as leaders, I think that, and in fact, I was lucky enough to do some overseas study earlier on this year. This concept of being versus doing was raised, and it was actually raised on the first day of a 3-week course.
Yeah.
And that is the difference. And I'm also lucky that I'm married to someone who is way smarter than I am. So she's also really good at making sure that A, you have a break, you have a holiday, B, that you make sure you're allocating time for your interests or passions or otherwise, and that you are when you're there, you're there.
Yeah.
And I've always over the years had to log back on at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night to make sure you're up to speed with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And or early in the morning, but you really do try to I try not to take my phone to the table.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder these days than it used to be. It used to never be a problem, but you've just got to make sure you're there and that you're present.
Be present.
Yeah.
So explain the concept of being versus doing.
I sort of liken it to working on the business and working in the business, in the sense that you are present, you are planning. When you're being, you're planning, you're strategizing, you're thinking, you're forward looking. Whereas when you're doing, you are just head down, crunching through whatever it is that you've got to get done, whatever problem you've got to solve, whatever issue you've got to fix. And you're not really looking down the road. You're looking in the rear vision mirror often.
Yeah. So it's hard to do though.
Very hard.
I mean, because I remember even in one of our previous conversations, you said one of the great things, because it was Oxford. You went to Oxford, right?
That's right.
I want to talk to you in depth about that leadership piece after. But when I remember you said to me one thing that I learned, which kind of smacked me in the face when you did this, was the ability to stop and think.
Yes.
And is that what that being versus doing?
That's exactly what it is. And I'm also very lucky that I've got a chairman who is excellent at that. And he over the time I've worked for him, if I've ever got too caught up in the weeds, he will grab me by the collar and almost physically lift me up to say, mate, the business can't afford for you to be the one that's reliant on running that part of the operation or running that part of the sales team or whatever it happens to be. You need to make sure you got the right people doing the right things so that the business can function. And brilliantly, time away proved to me that I've got the right people and that they are doing a great job, and the business didn't need me while I was away, and that was just sensational.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's look into your career, and then as you sort of started moving and towards becoming the CEO of Northline, executive roles at Ridges and Accor.
So when I was a young guy, I was living in Perth, and Dad had said to me one day after I think my first semester uni results came out, Dad said to me, "I'm not sure this full-time university study is the right thing for you." Basically, I was playing up. I was enjoying myself too much. I spent more time at the pub than I did at the university. And Dad said, "I think you might have just taken this university life to the extreme. Why don't you think about getting a full-time job and then completing your studies part-time?" I managed to get this job at a company called Ahern's, which is like John Martin's here in Adelaide, and eventually got bought by David Jones, just like John Martin's did. And I was an internal auditor for these guys because I was studying business at the time. And talk about a tedious job. And if there's anything at the lower end of the white-collar food chain, I think that was right down the bottom, getting till rolls from cash registers and going through them and looking for voided transactions or refunds and things like that. But you got to learn the basics of the business from the ground up. And I happened to be in the lift one day with a group of people who were running a hotel company, and they shared the same office building that I did. And I'd been talking to them in the lift on and off. They then stopped me one day and said, "Hey, we've got this job at the Novotel Hotel down the road. What do you think?" And so I went and had a chat to them, and before I knew it, I was the assistant financial controller, something I thought sounded pretty good back in about 1987 or 88, whenever that was. And there I was. I started a bit of a hospitality come hotel career. And I found from a grounding point of view that hotels and hospitality were terrific because from a financial point of view, you cover sales, you cover operations, you cover every HR and every IT and every other aspect of the business. You get to sort of come across and touch and feel. And eventually I took a transfer with them to East Coast. I relocated to Coffs Harbour in New South Wales, which was where everybody from New South Wales came to retire. And he was a 21-year-old bloke rocking up going, "Where have I landed?" And that hotel had just come out of administration. So it was a tricky place to go to because it had no money and it had a really bad reputation because they hadn't paid us bills. And we were a new management company coming in. And I'll never forget, on about the second day of being there, a truck rocked up to deliver fruit and veg, and they wouldn't take it off until I paid them. So I had the chef calling me saying, "You need to come to the loading dock because you got to sort this out." And I had to actually bring a checkbook and write out a check to make sure that we could get fruit and veggies for the kitchen to cook for that night's restaurant meal. So you learn pretty quick on the job in some of those type of things. And so I had a bit of a hotel career that covered some time on the Gold Coast, some time in Melbourne, some time in Sydney while I was in Coffs Harbour. And then I left that business and I moved to Canberra, and I was working for the Ridges Hotel Group, financially looking after 2 or 3 hotels in Canberra. And then after I'd done a couple of years there, I relocated to Adelaide in '94 to work at the Hyatt. So I was still following the hotel career, if you like.
Yeah. And what role were you offered there at the height?
A financial controller,
Oh, yeah.
eventually director of finance.
Yeah, beautiful.
And again, worked for another great role model there, a German guy, but he had a hospitality and hotel career that was 30 or 40 years in, and there wasn't much he didn't know. And so he had some great things to learn. He had a few things that you also thought, okay, I might not adopt all of his characteristics.
Absolutely.
But gee, he was a lovely man with a great heart too.
Just pick what you need.
That's right, exactly.
So I think that means if you came in 94, does that mean that you've been longer? I think you said it earlier. You've been longer here in South Australia than what you have in Perth?
Yeah, correct. That's right. So it's 29 years now. I think I've been in Adelaide, and that I left Perth when I was 22. So the reality is I'm now a crow eater, not a sand groper.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll claim you, mate. That's the true South Australian way. So where from here? So you're at the height. You're moving your way up the ranks there.
Yep.
What happens in your career now?
So during some of that time, Justine and I worked together. My wife Justine, or my now wife Justine, we worked together. She was in sales and marketing, so she always reminded me that she brought the money in and I counted it, if you like. But the reality of that was, for a career in hotels, that meant sort of travelling the world and becoming a global citizen. We were getting ready to get married and start families and all those sorts of things. So in the end, I looked for other opportunities, and I actually was lucky enough to get tapped on the shoulder by a guy called Bob Ford, who used to have a company called Proud Australia Group. That's in very different mould these days, but it had assets in Kangaroo Island. It had the Barossa wine train. It also had the Proud Mary on the Murray River. So it had a bunch of travel centres around Australia, one in each capital city, representing the Tourism Commission. And so I was able to go into that role as CEO and look after that national business. So my sort of service background come hospitality background worked very well in that case. And another commonality for me when I took over that job as CEO was, I think it was about May 2001, and I'd done a bit of work creating a new corporate plan, corporate strategy. And 6 months later, September 11 happened, and Ansett collapsed within a couple of days of that, and we relied on Ansett for all the domestic tourism. Oh, wow. And, of course, September 11 meant that international tourism just died. So we had to rip up that corporate strategy, throw it in the bin and deal with what we were having to deal with. And all of a sudden, not only did we have the challenges caused by those events, anyone that was working in tourism internationally became a domestic competitor because there was no international tourism happening. So that was equally a very challenging time. But we worked our way through that and came out of it on the other side a much better business and much better people for it.
Yeah, silver lining, right?
Yeah, mate.
It wouldn't have felt like it wouldn't have felt like that at the time.
It didn't.
It would have been very difficult. So from Prouds, you then decide to move into Northline as CFO as opposed to staying in the C-suite, CEO role.
That's right. Yeah. So through some contacts at Deloitte at the time, they were helping Northline looking for a CFO, and they'd actually had their own Deloitte person in there as CFO for a period of time. Okay. So through some of those networks and contacts, I had a conversation with the chairman, and before you knew it, there I was as the CFO. It was probably a larger turnover business, but not anywhere near what we are today. Yeah. And from that perspective, it had its own challenges, and it really was a family business that I was stepping into, and Proud Australia was a family business. So that, together with I'd been running a geographically dispersed business with Proud. Yep. Northline had depots around the country. And we really, even though we're in transport and logistics, we are a service industry. We are a service business. We're providing that transport service. How we get it there almost doesn't matter, whether it's road, rail, sea or air. Yeah. It's a magic wand how we move it, really. It's just a matter of making sure we're serving the customer.
Absolutely. So why did you decide to move away from the CEO role and back into a CFO? Just purely because of size, or was there a potential that you were going to take over at one point?
Well, there's not necessarily a discussed potential, but I could see that it was a business that had a lot of growth opportunities and it had some growth ambitions. And I just felt that from my perspective, I was going to be learning a whole new industry, and that just sort of made sense. And from that perspective, I've always encouraged and mentored other people to say, you know what, if you're going to learn, you're going to grow, and you can take that with you to whatever else it is that you want to do down the track.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you stop learning and you stop growing, then you sort of stand still, right? So from that perspective, it just sort of made sense at the time.
Yeah, brilliant. So I read a quote that you thought that when you joined Northline, it was all blue singlets and thongs.
Well, that was my perception of what the transport industry was. Of course, I mean, it's terrific to discover behind that and now what we've been able to add in terms of depth and breadth of sophistication.
Yeah.
But the industry is a whole lot more
I can
sophisticated
imagine,
than what you might think, than what most people from the outside think. You know, it is actually the logistics involved it can be quite complex from time to time. And I love the fact that we deal with customers who are, I would describe them as all shapes and sizes. So they're startups or they're blue chips or anything in between. They're in all geographies and all industry sectors. So I can be talking to someone about retail. The next conversation can be about pharmaceutical. Then it can be about construction and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, I love that sort of cut and thrust, if you like, of business per se.
Agnostic.
Yeah, exactly.
So you did a stint for 4 years as CFO, and then from what I understand, you were offered the CEO role at a game of cricket, a test match game. Is that correct?
Sort of, but not quite. Okay. I'd been offered the role and accepted the role. It was the announcement.
Announcement.
The announcement came out, I think it was a Friday morning from memory. The announcement came out, and at that time, the chairman, the guy who was CEO, who I was taking over from.
So the chairman is the founder.
Correct. Yes.
And he was the CEO at the time.
No. He was the chairman.
Okay.
But he had a guy who had been national operations manager, had become the CEO a few years before me.
Okay.
And so he was at the point of sort of lifestyle change.
Yep.
And so the three of us, the announcement went out in the memo back in the day, so to speak, which did get sent on email, of course, because it's only 2008. But we then went to the cricket. So my first day on the tools, in inverted commas, was literally at the cricket. And I'm not quite sure how I got home that night, but nonetheless, it was a great first day on the job.
Which match was it? Australia?
It was a test match at Adelaide Oval, so we were in the members. I
Can't
can't even tell you who it was. I'd have to Google it to know.
That's brilliant. So when you came on board as CE, what did it look like? Where was the business at that point?
Well, actually, was in not a bad place because back in sort of 2008, the Australian economy was travelling quite well.
Yeah.
But and if I remember rightly, in about September that year, the company, we'd just been celebrating the 25th anniversary of the company, which this year is our 40th. But as part of those celebrations, things had been looking terrific and rosy, and we were happy with where we were. And then along came this thing called the GFC that slapped us all in the face like a wet fish and woke us up from a bad dream in a big way.
I can imagine it would have been tough. I do have a whole bunch of questions around that in a bit later, so I'm going to pick your brain on that. But over the past 19 years, you've learned a little thing or two about scaling and growing a business, and you've taken it. So I guess when I was asking the question, where was it from an employee size, and where was it from from a business size, from a depot? I think we said earlier there's over 600 staff now and 18 depots. When you took over, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I think we had 8 depots, and I think we were about 250 people at that point in time. So it's tripled. Yeah, that's right. And in terms of other scalable things since then, we weren't in international in those days. Yeah. That's something that's come on since then. And you know, when we get into other depots, you get into a lot of other complexity around vehicles and staffing and all the things that go with it. So yeah, the business has continued to grow, mostly from an organic perspective. We're not a big merger and acquisition type of company. You know, we try to keep a very low debt profile. And so from that perspective, we don't have much debt. We don't go and borrow money to make acquisitions. It's about organic growth.
Yeah, very good. Now, you would have learned a few things about scaling and growing. Is there any insights that you can share?
It's all about people, Daniel, from my perspective. If you've got the right people in the right structure and the right culture, from that perspective, you know, you can get anywhere you want to get. You can manage change. You can You can manage the growth, you can transition whichever aspects of the business, technology or whatever else, other elements of it you need to do. If you've got to have the right people, you've got to have the right team, and you've got to have the right culture. Without that, you really are doing it the hard way.
Right. We're gonna deep dive here now, but I am interested in your relationship with your chair and owner, David. I know he likes to keep a little bit of a low profile, so we won't have to go into it too much, but he obviously has given you the authority and the leeway to take this on and grow it in the way you best see fit, yes?
Yes. Look, from that perspective, I mean, we've now got 19 years of history between the two of us. The level of trust, I've had 2 children born into the family during the time I've worked for him and with him. He and I have had many times, morning, noon, or night, where we've caught up, where there's been learnings, and I don't think today there's a decision that I would make that I know he wouldn't agree with.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't consult. That doesn't mean that you don't. You've got to be respectful. He's as sharp as a tack. He doesn't miss a thing, and one of those people that can look at a page of numbers and go, that one on the 8th line, third column across, that number there's not right.
Yeah.
So what's going on there, mate? You need to really get into that. Doesn't miss a thing, and keeps me on my toes still now. 19 years later. So that, I think it's about trust, and I think it's about understanding each other and what motivates each other, and being able to respond accordingly. And in a way, we complement each other. He has his own catch-ups with members of the executive team without me, because he wants to hear directly from them sometimes. And I totally encourage that. We're transparent, we're open. I think it's great that he can have that time and hear from them directly about the challenges that I might have been talking about, or the capital we need to invest, or whatever the particular issues happen to be, people issues or otherwise. So, after you work with and for someone, you develop that level of trust that makes the world a difference. Yeah. And it means you can, I don't have to worry about a share price, for example. And I love the fact I don't have to worry about, wake up every day and that's the first thing I've got to worry about, So from that perspective, it works. Well, that means there are constraints. There's definitely capital constraints. And that is the challenge to getting the growth right, is how we get that balance. And we just work our way through issue by issue as we need to. We've been supported by great bankers and things like that along the way that have worked with us and helped us. Yep. Because every time you get a property, you've got another whole heap of costs.
I can imagine.
Another whole suite of dollars that are required to support that growth. So, but I think ultimately the relationship with the chairman comes down to trust.
So he obviously founded the business and he ran it for how long?
He originally founded it. There was 4 people involved at the very beginning, and eventually 4 became 3, became 2, became 1.
Okay.
But he's been the one in it for the entire time. Yeah. And just recently, only literally 2 weeks ago, what I would describe as the very first employee just retired after 40 years of continuous service with the company. We just did a couple of terrific things for him, which I loved.
Fabulous.
One of them, we for the first time in my 19 years, we actually stopped our depot's operations out at Regency Park, and the team out there did this excellent guard of honour where they lined up all the forklifts in 2 lines. They raised the tines on them so the tines were up and all the drivers were off. It was perfectly safe. And the depot wasn't operating, so we were able to do it. And the operators were standing next to their forklifts, and the 2 oldest serving or longest serving employees at that depot, together with the guy that had 40 years service, and I walked through this guard of honour, and with everyone clapping, you sort of had this little tingle up and down your spine. It was sensational. And on a different occasion, we actually hired a minibus, and we took the sort of 10 or 12 longest serving employees in Adelaide on a bus trip, and we went and visited every depot and every corporate office that we'd had over the 40 years in Adelaide. Just drove past them, had a chat, did some reminiscing, talked about how things had changed over that 40 years, and then of course went for lunch afterwards.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was really unique. It was a great sort of fitting tribute. So David he's been the connection, if you like, from the very beginning all the way through today, and now we've got the next generation of his family. His son and his daughter are part and parcel of the business, and he's got another daughter who we will hope will join us in a few years' time when she's ready.
Brilliant. So 40 years, it's a pretty huge effort. I mean, what do they say? The average doesn't even make it past 10 years these days. The average business from startup to, yeah. What does the next 10 look like for you guys? Is it continual growth? Is it just to sort of hold your own? What does it look like for you?
I think a couple of things. First of all, we've got a strategic plan that runs for 23 to 25.
Yeah.
I tend to keep them to 3 years these days because I think beyond that is really crystal balling. Yeah. And I think whilst I like to have goals and aims, I think we've got to be realistic on the way through. But that is about growth. Yeah. And that growth will come organically primarily. It'll come from the growth in the economy and the growth in our industry sector, and we would also expect to get a growth in our market share of that sector as well. Yeah. Our sector will have some consolidation. There's lots of businesses that have been more or still remain very family, small, hybrid type of businesses. Yep. So there will definitely be consolidation that will create opportunities for us, whether that's opportunities to take something over or whether that's opportunities to acquire customers or just grow. And as long as we're doing the basics right, then that growth will follow. Yeah. If we've got an operational service we can sell and we've got the relationships with our customers and the relationships with our staff, the growth will come.
Absolutely. When does enough become enough though, right? Like that, you know, because you're doing very well for yourselves at the moment. The business is well known, it's well respected, extremely quality customer service. When does enough become enough?
Look, that is an ongoing challenge, I think, for everyone in a senior level in almost any industry sector, because you're always looking for that growth of revenue, you're always looking for that growth of profit, that growth of market share. And ultimately, I think it's, you know, we sort of talk about it in terms of building platforms. And so that we can then get to that next level, whether that platform is with a people structure or a technology structure or whatever other supporting mechanisms we need. So we will keep focused on that growth, because otherwise you end up getting into a very sort of cost mentality, and that can often have negative connotations. It doesn't have to have, but it often does have. So we'd probably prefer to avoid that and look to continue to grow and look to continue to improve everything we do. Yeah. You know, all of our plans involve continuous improvement in some way, shape or form.
Yeah, I heard a quote once. It's like, what happens to a tree when it stops growing? It starts dying, right? And I think business is kind of built off the back of that. If it's not growing from a revenue and profitable point of view, it's growing in a productive type way or improved way. So yeah, absolutely. Do you envisage on being the CEO for long term into the future?
Look, you know, I'd like to say I'm still a young fella. I'm certainly young at heart. But you know, look, from my perspective, for the foreseeable future, that's absolutely. And you know, you never know what that means down the track in terms of I've still been connected to the business for many years to come, and maybe helping and guiding the next generation through. You know, I think that's one of the things I took away from my study is that's incumbent on me to give back a little bit in that way. I've been privileged, I've been lucky, and I need to make sure the next generation in our business, and not only in our business, anyone else that I can help, including my own children, that I can give some of my time and my advice and my experience to some of them to help them develop and grow. And that is where I think I'll spend a lot of the next 10 years doing a lot of that.
Brilliant. So there's a mark of celebration for the 40 years and new offices or headquarters in Kent Town and a new depot as well. Is that going to be number 19 depot?
So the depot is going to be in Brisbane. So we're currently grounds broken. That's underway in Brisbane. We just need it not to rain over there, touch wood. And that should be ready for sort of April, May next year. That's the plan from that depot. That will replace another depot though, so it'll stay at 18. Yep. But it has expansion opportunity as part of that because it's another, I think, 6,000 square metres under roof from where we are now. Yep. And the headquarters in Adelaide, that's in Kent Town, in King William Street, Kent Town. I actually was there yesterday, and the footings were starting to be prepared. So we should be moving into there hopefully September, all things going well, September 24.
Very good.
There are a couple of initiatives that we launched this year as part of the 40th. We had a pretty good party back in March down at the Victoria Park Social Club.
And so you should.
And we had customers, we had staff, we had suppliers join that for a fairly big night. And then we had one in Darwin in May where we were at the sailing club in Darwin right on the water. And the Minnows, who are the junior sailors, we sponsored them for many years. I think at least, I'm going to say 15, but I might be wrong. And they've got some Northline sails, so we got them to sail past before sunset. And that was just a great way to start the night. Yeah. We had a bit of a circus theme and another big party in Darwin, and we're doing one in Alice Springs in October.
Brilliant. So the business was started out of Darwin, is that correct? I mean, because Northline, can you explain it actually, because I didn't realise this. Where did the name Northline come from?
Pretty creative. Yeah. I'm told it was on the back of a coaster at the pub, but I haven't seen the coaster, so I can't be 100% sure.
There's a lot of pubs in these conversations. Is that the blue?
It has to be. It's the singlet and thongs, right?
The singlet and thongs, that's right.
I think the creativity of the name is a line north from Adelaide to Darwin.
Yeah.
And when we first started, we were obviously servicing Alice Springs, Katherine and Tennant Creek on the way through.
So it was born out of the NT?
It was born out of Adelaide, effectively, but as servicing the Adelaide to NT lane on the basis of the fact that most people saw that as remote, most people saw that as difficult. Doing things like Sydney to Melbourne or Adelaide to Melbourne or whatever wasn't perceived to be difficult, whereas anything in the NT was perceived to be that
through the Red Desert.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then expansion sort of came on the back of customers where... Say the Brisbane came as the next depot 4 or 5 years later on the basis that we were servicing Powers Brewing from Brisbane to Darwin. And so from that perspective, that's how the company then got into the Brisbane market and eventually into the other markets around Australia.
Brilliant. So earlier you said get the right people in and culture. So I'm very interested in the cultural piece. And all conversations to date that you and I have had have proven to me that you have a firm eye on the cultural piece within the organisation. What is it, from things like driving from depot to depot, and what is it that is about your culture that you believe is different or great?
I think that the underlying family values provide that benefit that everybody sees in wanting to be a member of the team, whether that's a local team or a national team. And so from that perspective, we provide the flexibility and we look after people. And they want to come to work for us ultimately. As part of that strategic plan I was talking about, we're doing an EVP piece, employee value proposition piece, mostly because particularly during COVID, there was a lot of challenge around staff turnover. We had situations where companies like some of the bigger companies, not even direct competitors to us, but like a Coles distribution centre, when COVID was hitting, they might have had 1,000 staff working there, and if they had 10% not turn up because of COVID, they'd have 100 people not turning up, which is a big deal. Whereas for us in one of those depots, might have only been 10 or 15 not turning up. The reality of that was they started doing things like paying silly money on a per hour basis, and you can understand why those guys that are in those jobs wanted to take those opportunities. So it has been a tricky time, and what we've wanted to do is focus on, well, for those staff that are new to us, why did you come to join us? What did you see, and why did you want to come? And for those that have been with us for a while, why have you stayed? And so we can understand what those triggers and those levers and those things that are important to them, and make sure that our employee value proposition actually represents those things that are important to those people. I think some of our stats are that out of the 600 odd staff, there's more than 100 that have got 10 years service, and then there's another, I think, 50 on top of that have got 5 years or more service. So there's a really good tenure of people that have stayed with the business for a very long time. And that stability makes a really big difference in the culture piece and the structure piece. it means that people understand what you expect of them,
Yeah.
and then they are passing that on through their levels of their business. So, the EVP survey that was not long ago completed, I think our engagement score was around 77%, which from our industry side is pretty good. And but you still want to get that to 80 or 85 or whatever, wherever you can try to improve it.
Absolutely. So the blue collar industry is definitely one that sees culture as like this soft piece in kumbaya. How have you managed to get through your messaging through and your communications through? This is what we're creating. This is the culture that we're trying to achieve.
The challenges that come with some of those things is those guys are not necessarily, whilst they are electronically connected with their own mobile phones, they're not necessarily connected to logging on and checking emails or getting information shared.
They're on the road, right? Yeah.
That's right. They're either on the road or they're on a forklift or they're running around a facility. So really the piece comes back to the leadership, and it comes back to team meetings and toolbox meetings and discussions and branch meetings for that matter, where the messages are being passed on and the messages are being passed through. And, we're also, to add sort of complexity to that, we're always trying to do an optimization project of some sort.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that often means change for those guys. And we're not doing it this way anymore. We're now doing it that way. Just changing the route management software, the way that we send trucks out to do pickups and deliveries. And that involves change. And as part of rolling out that change, one of the things we did not that long ago was create our own project management office, our own PMO, and that's really helped us get that level of sophistication into project management and making sure that the communication, because I think so much of it comes back to communication and sharing of the information and taking their feedback. One of the comments we got from one of the forklift drivers in that EVP survey I talked about was when he was asked what else could we do, he said, well, and I don't know who the individual was because I think that part of it was anonymous, but he said, well, you can't do anything else because you're treating me like a king now by asking my opinion. And you sort of think to yourself, wow, is it that simple?
Yeah.
But, in some ways it actually is. They want to be heard.
Yeah.
And the best ideas to change, improve and innovate come from the floor. They come from those guys.
100%.
They don't come from the corporate office.
Well, it's music to my ears. As you know, we are a consulting company that works within change, specialises in change and business transformation. And when you think about great organisational change, it is about setting up the project for success from the front end, right? And Abraham Lincoln famously said, if you gave me 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 6 hours sharpening the saw. So it's very much around getting that front part right.
Yep.
And so we, through our methodologies, we have our own framework which we follow, where we take businesses through that framework. And one of those key pillars in that framework is perspectives and understanding those perspectives of all those people, right? The front line, the key stakeholders, the community, the customer, you name it, we gain those perspectives and we pull it together. And I think about, I'll give you a scenario, and I think we may have talked about this last time, but if you're at an intersection and there's a car accident in the middle of this intersection, and Craig, you're on one corner and I'm on the other, and we're both looking at this car accident, and you saw the little black cat that ran across the road, and I saw the guy on the mobile phone in the back on the back car. We both saw this car accident from a different perspective, and yet none of us are wrong about why it occurred. So if we can draw out those perspectives, and you said you often hear some stories that come out from that front line that you go, wow, like that's where some of our innovation can come from. So it's about how do we draw that out from our teams, I think is really important.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think, first of all, I'm borrowing that analogy because I really like that analogy. I think that's a ripper. From my perspective, people have to listen.
Yeah.
And because perception is reality, right?
Correct.
And perspective is reality.
Correct.
So we need to understand that. Otherwise, you can't improve. You can change technology as much as you want to, but if it's not going to help someone, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah.
And technology is quite important in the things that we do. Everyone expects to know exactly where every piece of freight that they've given us is, and we could have 30 or 50,000 pieces of freight floating in our network at any given point in time in any capital city, or on a truck, or on a rail, in a rail container, on a rail line somewhere. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That getting the feedback and getting the reality from the guys that matter. I mean, they're the ones that ultimately make or break your financial results.
They do.
They're the ones that make or break your profit. They're the ones that make or break the service that you're providing, and that service is what you're selling, and that service in our game at least, and that service is what will help you grow. So, and that's the big key. And then when we get Mother Nature often gets in the way and causes challenges that we have to deal with, and that's when you find yourself doing rather than being. When the rail line's gone out, or there's a fire or a flood or some other thing, there's challenges central come running at us at those points in time, and before you know it, you're not being able to deliver that service that you've promised, or you're not able to deliver what's expected or what you did last week because of this challenges that's been put in your way. And again, communication's key, communication with the staff, communication with the customers. And if you get those parts of it right, people can forgive when something goes wrong. I mean, we can't help what Mother Nature's done in those instances, fires and floods, and everyone understands and knows, as long as they know what's going on and when it will arrive or when it will be there, it allows them to make their own decisions and work around it accordingly.
100%. You guys pride yourself. I mean, Northline prides itself on its customer service. In fact, you say it's kind of what sets you apart from the. What does that look like? I mean, you said communication and all the above is critical, but what does great customer service look like in the logistics industry?
That's a really good question. And from my perspective, it is a personal service. So you won't call our customer service centre and get asked to push 1 or push 2. You will get, it might take 10 seconds or whatever the number is for the call to get connected, but you will get to talk to a person. Our phone numbers are available. Our names are on the website. I get emails from people from time to time who don't know me directly, but they've connected my email address up. My mobile phone number and the executive team's access is on our intranet, so staff can get hold of it, and it gets given out to customers. And my business card has my mobile number on it, and I give it to them, and I'll give it to customers. And if there's a problem, if we don't know about it, we can't fix it.
Yeah.
So that really good customer service is about the relationships you have with your customers, and therefore the relationships you've had with your staff. And that's through good and bad, because every relationship gets tested at one time or another. We have a customer service centre here in Adelaide run by a terrific team of people that are all really focused on delivering the best possible outcomes for our customers. And so, I could save, I don't have an exact number, but I could save hundreds of thousands of dollars by offshoring that to the Philippines or to India or somewhere, but it just won't happen, right? Not under our watch. It's not going to happen, because you want to talk to a human, and you want to talk to someone that's here, that knows what suburb is in this state, as opposed to, some of those other people wouldn't know where Murray Bridge is, or wouldn't know where Port Augusta is, or whatever else,
They're
right?
not connected to the land, right?
Exactly. So from that perspective, we think that's really important. And, what we've been trying to do is improve the connections through technology to allow them to spend more time being proactive rather than reactive. We don't just want to talk to a customer when they want to know when they're going to get their freight. We want to talk to them to say, hey, we're already ahead of the game. It's already loaded. It's going to arrive tomorrow or the next day or whenever, ahead of the time it's due, and keep people in the loop, as opposed to having to respond to something after an event. And it's the proactive side of things that we're really focused on right now.
Do you, from a customer service point of view, I think you talked about frontline staff, truck drivers and the people who are actually freighting the stuff. Do they have contact point with the customer as well? And how do you train them, especially like the subcontractors, probably more so than I'm interested in anything else?
That's a real challenge, because they're not necessarily a direct employee. And our business model is that we tend to use our own employees in our own trucks in the regional locations where there's not a pool of subcontractors. So in a Darwin or a Alice Springs, Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, they're our guys, employees in our vehicles that we own. But in the capital cities, they are subcontractors. So that challenge is exactly as you said. It is exactly how it is. And we've probably got 4 or 5 touch points with our customers, because we've got customer service effectively in a call centre environment. We've got salespeople who, every customer with us is allocated a sales rep of some sort. whether they are someone based in an office or whether they're people that are on the road going out to visit. Every customer is connected to a salesperson. Then you've even got people. You've got your people in fleet control that are organising to pick up or deliver. They are a touch point. The drivers are touch points, and of course, even the people that are collecting the money that we're owed are a touch point.
Yeah.
So that customer service ethos, and that has to be shared not just through them, those 5 touch points, but through the broader business to make sure that everyone understands. And to do that, a number of years ago, we created a concept called connectivity. And it looks like a whole bunch of squiggly lines in a lot of ways when you see it, as part of some of the sort of branding that we do in the offices. But underneath it actually has every postcode within Australia listed in there, and the name of the suburbs, so that it just shows that we can go anywhere, anytime, to any location. So what we try to do is connect our customer with their customer, and that's what we mean when we're talking about it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I love it. I want to go back, just touch on change for a second. I think this will lead into a conversation around leadership. And you did this Oxford course recently, which I'm very keen on picking your brain on. But there's a lot of change going on in the world at the moment. I think as a leader, as a CEO, there's more shiny objects there in the world that you can sort of grab onto and pick and choose from than ever before. AI is changing the way things are done. How do you as a leader manage your appetite when it comes to, no, we're just going to toe the line, stick with the strategy. Oh, there's something new I'm going to run over. And how do you avoid the fear of missing out, or, do you get what I'm saying?
I absolutely get what you're saying. And I think AI is probably the best example in that space. I mean, we are actually trialling our first use of, I'm sure the terminology is bot.
Yeah.
We're using one of those right now for the first time to look to replace some sort of repetitive back office type of tasks.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, it's not really in use in a physical sense in a depot. I'm sure that time will come.
Yeah.
But for the time being, you're right. That is something that becomes a project, and for us, other things that fit into that space are things around climate change and sustainability, where there are big challenges on the global sense as to where are we going as a global economy, and as places where people live, what are we doing about that? And from my perspective, there's some long time horizons that people have to sort of chip away at. That's not something that there's one easy quick fix for.
Yeah.
But as new technologies emerge, and technology is the easiest space where the shiny objects distract you, there's no doubt. That's where, from our perspective, once we've set up the strategy and the structure, we've got the projects going through the project management office, that allows us to be able to keep those things on track, and allows a small number of people to get distracted to see, is there something else that we should be looking at? And they're usually more senior execs that are doing those.
Yeah, I think because there's the electric is the big shiny object also that's out there in the market at the moment, and there's a company here in South Australia or in Australia somewhere that has the ability to convert diesel and petrol into electric vehicles. So you don't have to go out and buy an electric vehicle. We can actually just convert the motor for you.
Okay.
It's that sort of shiny object.
Yeah, right.
That when do you make that call of the conversion is like, because you're so reliant on everything else that comes with it, the roads being up to date, the charging points being up to date. There's this talk of swap and go as it happens from an electric point of view. You're obviously, your hands are tied, isn't it, from an environmental point of view or an emissions point of view?
Certainly from an emissions point of view, using rail as a mode of transport is a far better one than by using road, because it uses less emissions and it can carry more. And the rail companies are very proactive in that space around sharing information. Electric vehicles are still in their infancy when it comes to trucks. There is some trials going on out there, but when you need vehicles to cover 500, 800, 1,000 kilometres in a day, electric doesn't cut it, unfortunately, or not yet. Now, that time will come. That's got to come from the batteries more than it's got to come from anything else. I reckon in the bigger vehicle sense, it'll skip electric and end up with hydrogen. I know there's a lot of buses and a lot of other vehicles like that have gone to hydrogen, and we're expecting that that's where it will end up. And for the time being, to get around that, we do other things like partnership with other charities and other companies where we can use either electric or where, for example, we'll do some work so that we'll divert products from going into landfill that will allow us to make sure that we're keeping our emissions footprint as low as possible on the way through. Because there's no doubt the industry we're in is an emitter. So, you can't just stick your head in the sand and pretend it's going to solve itself, because it's not. You just got to do all the small things along the way to make sure you're doing your bit. And as the technology gets to those points, then you've got to do the investigation and eventually an investment to make sure that it happens. But for the time being, it's still probably more expensive to be clean than it is to be dirty, and that's the reality of where we are at this point in the cycle. But we're wanting to do our bit along with everybody else.
I mean, there's only so much you can do, right? Cash is king. So we always keep coming back to that. So let's jump into this Oxford leadership program that you just recently returned from. It was a couple of weeks ago now, or a month or so ago now that you...
Oh, yes. I was there in June.
In June,
I was there for 3 weeks of June.
So it was a leadership and management course?
Advanced Management and Leadership Program was what it was called,
Brilliant. What were the key takeaways?
Oh, gee, there's so many.
I know. Just looking back now and thinking to yourself, that was one thing that I've absolutely changed the way in which way I think about leadership.
Well, we've already touched on it, sort of. The being versus doing aspect was something I wrote down, I think, on my first day when I was there, and I've referred to it and reflected back on that concept a lot. And that means setting up my day differently, and that means setting up the way I operate with my team differently, and really making sure you're concentrating on the bigger picture far more than what I was before I went away.
So let's jump into that. Setting up your day, what does that look like?
So, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have someone that assists me on a day-to-day basis with getting all the comms out that I need, getting calendar entries or whatever done. That's one of the things I love, and what keeps me really on my toes is that no 2 days are ever the same. You know, today I'm here with you, and I'm meeting with our bankers later on today. You know, whereas on Tuesday I was with a customer, and on Wednesday I was with the sales guys. So, from that perspective, no 2 days are the same. And it's really about where I see where my focus needs to be. And right now, given the economic challenges that have been going on, my time is being spent more sort of mentoring and engaging with the sales team, so I can get more messages from the field about what the customers are telling us, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, what their volumes look like in the lead up to Christmas and beyond, and understanding what that and the implications of that, so that we can make sure we got the operations and the sort of back of house stuff okay. So at the moment, I'm spending way more time in that space than I have previously. And ultimately, we're a sales-based business, so that's where I should be spending more of my time. I think in terms of takeaways from being on the course, prioritising where you want to spend your time, linking that to the strategic plan, and really making sure that you have enough time to think and enough time to plan have been the biggest issues that I've taken away out of it. I was really pleasantly surprised that what I saw and what I heard, there was 40 people on the course from 21 countries and 22 different industry sectors. Heaps of diversity. And I haven't spent 3 weeks with people from Nigeria and Botswana and South Africa and Oman and all of these sort of countries in the world. I haven't spent that amount of time with people from those different cultures ever. And to hear their perspectives and understand their problems compared to what we have in Australia, we're so lucky. In Australia and in Adelaide even more so than broader Australia, we are so lucky. And we do so many things so well. That was one of my takeaways, is that we've got to do more of what we are doing, whether it's technology, people, whatever it happens to be. We get most things right, and we can't think that we're not and that everything else is better, or the grass on the other side of the road is greener,
Yeah.
because ultimately it's actually not.
What was one of those things that you heard that you just thought, wow?
Well, when you were hearing about the challenges and the organisation structures that some of those people were working with, you sort of sit back and you go, okay, well, I would probably do it this way, or I would probably do it that way. And you say, well, that, some of those things are pretty straightforward. But when you hear about some of their problems, that's what really you go, oh, wow. There was a lady in South Africa who was describing to me the problems that they have to deal with energy that's rationed every day. And they never know from one day to the next how many hours worth of energy they're going to get, how much power are they going to have to run a manufacturing plant. Tomorrow it could be 4 hours, could be 3 hours, could be 5 hours. They don't know. And to try to work your way through that every day, gee, talk about a wicked problem, like that would bend your head out of shape, wouldn't it?
Yeah. They do have lots of problems over there, I think.
Mate, they really do. So, you can understand why they have some of the other problems that flow off from some of those things. But, it just reminded me how lucky we are as much as anything else.
You alluded to earlier, you said, how do I structure my day and how do I work with my executive team? What's changed around the way in which you work with your executive team? How do you structure that now?
So we've got a fairly small executive team. We deliberately run it with a COO, a CFO, and myself, and I'd like to describe that as a horizontal structure. We get together once a week, and that's it. We allocate an hour and a half a week, and the rest of it is if we need to on a phone call. Otherwise, we can go days without necessarily talking to each other or coming across each other. And each week after we've had our meeting, we connect up with other key parts of the business. So once a month we would meet with head of HR, once a month the head of sales, once a month the head of the international business, and so on. And we give them an hour of our time after our hour and a half to hear where their challenges or problems or whatever else, what other help we need from them. And then, so that's the way that allows us to get on with doing all the other things that we need to do and not just getting caught up in meetings. Between the three of us, we don't like meetings, and we really try to avoid them if we can help it.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned to me on this course as well, there was an expert negotiator that was invited to speak to the cohort, as well as Toto Wolff, which is the Mercedes Formula One chief. Can you any insights from those two? I mean,
those we had a guest speaker once a week come in.
Yeah.
And in the first week, it was a lady who was the chief negotiator for kidnap and ransom for Scotland Yard.
Yeah, wow.
And she looked like somebody's nana, right? So, I that's just a visual, I suppose, I'm trying to give you. But she don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Yeah,
like
correct.
when you looked at her, you would never have expected that. But once she started talking, I think I wrote down 40 dot points in the hour and a half that she was speaking about ways to improve negotiation and how you go about it. And she was hilarious in the end, but had this sort of steely resolve. You could sense it in the way that she was speaking, and just a wonderful human being. And gosh, what a tough job, because the consequences of what she gets right and what she doesn't get right are pretty big. They're often someone's life, so huge. And Toto Wolff, he was another one of the speakers. Well, he was very well received, and he drove from London to Oxford to give us 2.5 hours of his time, and they called it a fireside chat, even though it was like 35 degrees outside in London. We just talked about leadership and management and his style and what's worked and what's not. Everyone kept trying to drag him into the particular race in Abu Dhabi, I think it was, and everyone wanted all the details about what happened and how it went down. I think it was an Australian official that ruled against them in that sense. Yeah. Aussies weren't his favourite group of people, but he's an impressive guy. He really is an impressive guy to listen to and hear from.
What was one of the dot points that you wrote down from a negotiation point of view?
The first things you need to do in any conversation is listen, so that you can understand what someone else's position is, what they're looking for, why they're doing what they're doing.
The perspective, right?
Correct. And one of the guys that works for us has always said to me, he's a 75-year-old guy. I've always heard from him. you got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and make sure you use them in that proportion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that one. So you were asked to write a poem as well, weren't you?
Oh, yes. That was the most confronting thing I've done for a while.
Can you explain Can you explain what you had to do?
At the end of the course, to sort of reflect on your time there, we had to write a poem or a statement called Why I Lead. And in a way, it almost got a little bit emotional towards the end of it. But and then you had to stand up in front of the 40 members of the cohort and you had to read it twice. The first time because everyone would have been a little bit nervous and there would have been a few cobwebs and whatever else that you had to get off your chest and deal with the emotions of getting it out. And then the second time was really to enjoy, I suppose, as much as anything else, getting this out. So, we spent 3 or 4 hours one day with everybody going through one by one, reading out their poems. Mine wasn't so good at rhyming. The sort of poetry, creative side is not really me. But
poetry doesn't need to rhyme.
Well, yes, quite right. Of course, of course, you're right. But that was how I was focused when I was trying to do this at like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, 100%. Amateur poet. That goes for the rhyming. So why do you lead?
Well, ultimately, at the end of that process, that's where my reflection had come to around giving back. And so I'd been lucky enough and privileged enough to learn, and we talked about role models over the course of today. I've been able to learn from other role models, and people have given me their time and their experience. And I think I got to the point of saying, well, I lead to make it a better organisation. I lead to make better people within that organisation. But now I think I'm going to lead to give more back of my time, give more back of my experience. And like I've already said, I think that's to develop leaders, but it's also to develop better humans. And I want to make sure that includes helping other people, whether they're in not-for-profits or whether it's my own children or their friends or, my wife or whoever, to help those people get and do the things that they want to do out of life as well. And I have the opportunity to be able to do that, so I damn well should. That's the way I sort of looked at it at the end.
It's not for the faint-hearted, though, is it?
Well, I think that it's everyone's different, right? And you always end up having to make some tough decisions along the way in any senior leadership role, and you can affect the course of someone's career, or you can affect the course of someone's life almost in a way. So you want to make sure that you've really thought those things through, and that you're having conversations with people along the way to make sure they know where they stand. That can be good, bad, or otherwise. I introduced the concept when I was at Oxford to a group of people in one of the meetings about a shit sandwich that they hadn't heard before, So make sure you've got something good at the beginning and something good at the end, and deliver the message in the middle, you know. So, and of course that's an Aussie colloquialism, if you like. So that, that went down a treat, and there's a few people from different countries using that now.
So, as a leader, you have been quoted to say that, you're there to fill the potholes and knock down the hurdles for your team and all the above. I, as a leader and CEO of a business as well, have a remarkable team. I think of which these people are so much smarter than me.
Absolutely.
So how do I position myself, or how do we position ourselves in the way of removing hurdles when they're already super intelligent and smart and practical and all the above, right? Like, how do you play that role?
I think the way to play that role is to listen, so don't stay at your desk. You've got to get out and you've got to hear from people what's getting in their ways, because you can't know everything that's going on in a business every day. So from my perspective, it's about hearing and understanding and making sure the culture and the environment is such that people will tell you. So walk to the customer service centre and hear from those people, see what the waiting time for calls are, understand, why the call's up. Is there a service problem in Melbourne or Sydney or something that I didn't know about this morning?
Yep.
And make sure that where you can, you eliminate those so that everything else keeps running.
And you always got the strategy in your hand? Is that
you
why
have to? Yeah. You have to. And I hate bureaucracy and I hate politics. I haven't got time for either of those things. I don't mean politics in the true sense of the word. I mean office politics and those things that can go on in
Gossip.
businesses. Yeah, all that. Having said that, the water cooler can help sometimes. But from my point of view, you haven't got time or energy to lose on politics and bureaucracy. You need to make sure those things don't exist.
100%. So on reflection, you're saying communication is key.
Is king.
King.
It really is. It's key. It's king. Listening and communicating, and that's how you're going to get change to happen, isn't it?
Yep.
That's how you're going to transform things that you want to transform.
How do you, as a company, know? Like, we go back to the shiny things that keep popping up left, right, and centre. And yes, you're right. Crystal balling, if you're looking at 10 years and above, so 3 years, not so much. But do you review your strategy every year and go, right, or in the moment you say, actually, we need to change this now. Things have changed now.
If that happens, yes, we do. For example, we actually removed annual budgeting a few years ago because we said things just can change, can be quite volatile. We end up having to do effectively a weekly profit and loss statement in our business so that we know, because the volatility can be a 5 or 10% swing in revenue from one week to the next, because we don't know everything that's going on in every one of our customers' businesses, right? So from our perspective, we do a forecast and we update that forecast every quarter so that we can know we've won that work, we've lost that work, this has changed, that's changed, and you can make sure you're chasing a target that's real. Because 12 months down the track or 11 months down the track, it's not the same. So if we have to, we are very agile in that perspective, and we can change, on the spin of a coin, basically, and we do that where we need to.
So you've been at the helm for 15 years now and gone through what is a global financial crisis in 2008. You then went through COVID, and now there's talk of a recession again in 12 to 24 months. What's your experience? So let me ask this in a quick different way. What is your thought on the potential recession that is coming based on your experience?
So I like to describe our business as a barometer of what's happening in the economy, because if people are buying, or if people are having things made, or if they are building, or they're whatever, they do need items transport or moved around, right? So I think we're a barometer.
Yep.
And when the GFC came, towards the end of 2008, when the GFC was already hitting other countries, we were still travelling well. Come the beginning of 2009, it all fell into a heap. And what I was able to reflect on there was that people had used up all the inventories they had in their warehouses or factories or whatever else first, and then had just stopped reordering because they weren't having the demand for their goods and services. And so that meant it was later to hit and later to come back as well. But now what I'm seeing is a definite, and COVID, I suppose I would say we were a beneficiary in all reality.
Yeah.
Our industry was a beneficiary because supply chain interruptions and all the other things that happened, everybody ordered more, everybody built more, everybody did more of everything.
People weren't going on the big $30,000-$40,000 holidays,
right.
and they were spending it on around the house, right?
That's exactly right, and we could see that, except for the very first sort of 4 or 5 weeks that went from part of March through to sort of close to the end of April 2020. That period of time was a little bit scary.
It was a deer in the headlights almost.
That's right.
Yeah.
Everybody was a bit like that. But really, from May 2020 onwards, you could just see the volumes change. And we got customers who do home gyms, and you can just imagine the volumes of work that we were doing for them. And we're doing work for a rice company. You just can't imagine how much of that was being moved around.
Toilet paper.
Well, yeah, exactly. So there was just so much of those types of volumes. Now I look at it, there is no question that there are a drop in the volumes going in and out of the ports across Australia. And so the importing and exporting volumes are definitely lower than where they were. But I think they've already hit the lowest part of where they're going to go. So from my perspective, I think interest rates will stay where they are for the time being. The inflation genie's not quite in the bottle, but it's not far off. I think we'll find come 2024 that things will slowly start to improve. I don't think it'll be a quick turnaround, but I think that once inflation's under control, interest rates can start to be cut again rather than increased, and I think that'll generate and stimulate the demand that'll reoccur. I can already, the building industry generally is still, and construction industry is generally still pretty strong. I think retail is probably suffering the most, and it'll be interesting to see how the Christmas season goes in line with that, and what they do around sales and discounts and otherwise to keep their volumes and demand as strong as they can.
What makes you think that it's at its lowest now? Based on what data have you got for that?
So that's really based on I'm saying that based on conversations we're having with customers, and based on the conversations that we're having with competitors and other people across a range of different industries to understand where they think it's at for their business. And I had lunch with a customer on Tuesday, and some of the, they're in the manufacturing space, and from their perspective, they saw a drop off in May and June, but they've seen a pickup May, June, and July, I should say. And they've seen a pickup come August and September, and I can reflect that in our own volumes and numbers going through our business. So it seems to be like it's already started to slightly turn a corner.
So you're far more optimistic than some people that I've spoken to in this. There are some people, and I haven't had them on the show, but there are some people that believe it's coming in 12 to 24 months, so a bit further out.
Yep.
Given what you know, how would you prepare for a recession if it was to come? How would you guys be thinking about it?
Well, from our perspective, it's really just a matter of making sure you've got the basics right, so that even if your own customers' volumes are not the same as what they were, what you don't want to do is lose any customers in that process. And you want to be able to be there for when the times are good or the times are better. And in the meantime, just continue to push the organic sales growth to make sure that you can keep adding more customers to the pipe. And at the same time, have a look at all your overhead costs and systems and make sure that they're as clean and manageable as they can be. So from our point of view, we've often been a bit counter-cyclical in that space too sometimes. So when things have been tough, we've found that our industry hasn't had the same pain that maybe some others have. And our strategy's been deliberate that those customers are in all geographies, so that if there's a downturn in one state, say a mining downturn, that might affect WA more than other places, that only has a small impact on us. And equally all industry sectors. So if retail's a bit off, the other sectors will still be going okay. So as a general rule, that keeps us in good stead, other than the likes of a GFC, when everyone in every industry's in a world of pain.
For those who aren't really essential service, so what's your advice to them?
Know your customer.
Professional services, like where those sort of services will get cut because they're nice to have as opposed to a must have.
I think you've got to know your customer, and you've got to know what's going on in your customer's business, so that you can, if there are those changes coming for your customer, what can you do to provide them, if it's professional services, what can you do to provide them the advice, the support, run the project or otherwise, know what's happening with them and be ahead of the game with them, so that you're providing them the support the whole way through. You almost want to make it that you're part of that team, even if you're an external. I agree and understand that it can be an easy cut or an easy saving to go about that, but ultimately you need to make yourself be part of that team, even from the outside, that they need to rely on to deliver that.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Now, I am conscious of your time, so we're going to start to wrap up. I do want to ask a couple of questions in regards to, we touched on it earlier in regards to family and mental health. How do you switch off? What do you do for yourself?
Look, first of all, I've got a great family that helped me do that by, just having interest in what the other people in your own family are doing, understanding what your girls and in my case, and your kids are up to, and your wife for that matter, and your broader family. great mates. You know, there's a bunch of guys that we have a hit at tennis with supposedly once a week. I'm the worst attendee of all of them, and they remind me of that from time to time. But just making sure that, you know, I love football. I love sport generally. Kids have played a lot of basketball and a lot of netball. I've tried not to miss a game. And, you know, I do things that most other people do in terms of my own exercise. Even though it doesn't look like it, I actually do exercise most days.
I think we're in the same boat there.
I tell you, that's the hardest thing I could get right. To talk about a management challenge. And so, yes, I do my own exercise, and that to me is a great place. That takes you to a great place when you're exercising. You don't concentrate on anything else but what you're doing at that point in that time.
Yeah, it's almost what's a form of meditation in its own right, isn't it?
I agree.
It gets your mind away.
Totally agree. And then other things, you know, whether, like I said, whether it's sport, whether it's even reading or gardening or otherwise, you know, there's all of those sorts of things. And I only had a coffee yesterday with Nick Lee and Tom Neamy from Healthy Minds.
Yep.
And, you know, those guys have got some great content and producing some wonderful things that we're looking at including in our leadership programs. And, you know, just to provide people with the opportunities to understand that, you know, yesterday was Are You OK Day. So, you know, have those conversations and have those discussions. And whilst there's a little bit gimmicky when it's around a particular day like that, if that's what it takes to force people to have those conversations and look out for other people, then so be it. It's an important part of what we all need to do.
Yeah, I think it's one that you should ask yourself too, right? I think it was a great day for reflection for a lot of leaders in looking at themselves and the way in which they apply. I know I did. My daughter actually played Sapsaza basketball yesterday, and I took the day off to spend with her. But there was a lot of reflection and not actually being on the tools. And you can go, okay, what do I need to do to get my health in order here?
And what you just said is so important, having that day with her at that game. She'll never forget that, right? Yeah. She will always remember that. And that's one thing I've learned is you have to be there. You have to be part of it because, you know, being a parent's not you're not doing it from the as a bystander. You've got to be there to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, that's our first job, right?
Well, it is really.
Being a leader of a business is your second job.
I agree.
Very good. Right. Just before we jump into some quick fire questions, what does excite you about the future then?
Oh, look, just where we as a business are going and the things that we've got planned to help us grow and develop. That includes some technology, includes some optimization programs and other things that really just going to make us a better business, make us a stronger competitor, and allow us to sort of grow and develop and fly. So, you know, I love what I do. I've loved every bit of the last 19 years, and, you know, I'll continue to love it into the future.
Brilliant. What does your personal aspiration look like then?
Well, I think that's about, you know, from my own point of view, first of all, about being a better person, right? So that being a better leader, and that comes from that, but being a better person, being a better husband, being a better parent, being a better son, that's probably the one area I've you know, Dad's in Perth, so he's 86 years old, and I don't get to see him as often as anyone whose parents are in the same state as them, right? So, you know, I definitely would like to think I could be better there and better as a son-in-law as well to my parents-in-law. So, you know, that's part of that giving back that I was talking about before. I think that there's a time and a place now for me to do more of that, and you know, make sure that the business is steady and strong, and provide that stability in the leadership and provide that platform really to take it to the next level.
I love it. I think we all need to think about the last time we've called our parents, and
it's a tough gig.
Absolutely. Right. So quick fire questions. We're big readers here in Creating Synergy. Personal development and growth is core to what we do. I mean, is there anything you're reading right now that's of interest?
There's two on the nightstand at the moment. Yeah. One is called A Bone of Fact, which is written. It's an autobiography of David Walsh, who's the guy the Tasmanian gambler who built and funded the Mona, the Museum of Natural Art in Tassie, and also a ride of a lifetime, the Bob Iger from Disney. His CEO's and that's I'm only part way into that, but that seems like a great book, and we've taken the kids to Disneyland and Disney World a few times, so it's really connectable from my perspective.
Yeah, I'll get onto that. Absolutely. Is there any book that you feel that stands out from the crowd, like from a personal growth and development point of view, something that you may have gifted more often than not?
Something that really came through to me was a book called The Resilience Project.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Hugh.
I've seen him live, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so have I. And we took the whole family and we bought some books, and he's just a real knockabout bloke who... the way that he talks about empathy and gratitude, is just incredible, really. I mean, not taking for granted what you've got in front of your face.
Yeah, yeah. That going back to my day with my daughter yesterday and the reflections that I had, gratitude was one of those in which I need to sort of practice more, right? So I used to do it all the time off the back of the Resilience Project, actually, which was write 3 things down a day. And I started that again this morning.
Oh,
so,
good man. Well played. Good on you.
Yeah. What's one lesson that's taken you the longest to learn?
We've talked about it a couple of times already today. It's the being versus doing. It's how do you not get sucked into being caught up in everything going on day to day. And that's the old adage of being on the business, not in the business.
What are you going to do in that space then?
Well, I've already started to change the way that I prioritise, and I've changed the way that I allocate my time in the calendar. So there are blocks of time allocated when I will be either in my office or I'll be wherever I need to be able to spend more time planning, thinking, strategising, whatever else.
I like that. If you could have coffee with one current or historical figure, who would it be?
Well, I'd have to toss up between a couple, really. I'd love to have a coffee with Barack Obama.
Oh, yeah. He's probably one of the most that we get recommended, I would say, yeah.
He's probably the most impressive public speaker I've ever
Yeah,
I've
because you
ever
went and
seen.
saw him recently, didn't you?
Well, no, I listened to the interview that I logged on live to the interview that Julie Bishop did.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and he's just a terrific guy. I'd love to have been there, but and for me, it's also really hard to go past. I'm a huge fan of Coldplay, so Chris Martin at Coldplay. I'd probably rather have a drink with him than a coffee, but I reckon he's a great guy.
Coldplay is like my favourite band. They come only to Perth.
That's right.
It's so frustrating.
It is, but we've secured tickets to both the concerts. So I get to go and see Dad in Perth, and I get to go and see Coldplay twice, and sneaking in a trip to Margaret River while I'm there. So
if you know anyone that can get me some tickets, I will be forever in your debt.
Okay, I would get back to you.
What is some of the best advice that you've ever received?
Well, I think probably the single biggest advice, so again, I've already touched on it in our conversation, but when my dad said to me, I think you're enjoying life a bit too much. I think it's time you got real and studied part-time and worked full-time to understand the privilege you had of studying and really also the value of working and earning money and sort of paying for yourself on the way through. So I'm sure it wasn't an easy conversation for Dad to have with me, but it certainly resonated. And I listened to him. I followed his advice and don't look back.
He's going to listen to this podcast and he's going to claim it all now. He's like, this is all me. This is all me.
I'll have to teach him how to listen to a podcast
Yeah,
first.
that's true. What's one habit that holds you back the most?
Look, this could be quite comic around the office. Some people would say it's lunch.
I'm with you on that, I think.
Some of the others might say it's selective hearing, or at least maybe my family would say that. But because that takes up time, even though it's really important a lot of the time because you're doing it with customers, staff, suppliers. It's that connection I've been talking about. So it's just managing your time around it, and I'm sure that's not helping the exercise habits I was talking about before.
Well, I think it's also, I know this is a real first world problem, right? But it's the wine that goes with the lunch is the probably
very much a first world problem.
So what's one of your biggest pet peeves?
Generally, I'd call it whingers, or people that come with problems and don't bring solutions with them and expect you to provide it for them.
The worst.
Yeah.
It actually creates, I reckon it creates anxiety when they do that because you just think, because my brain goes straight into problem solving.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's actually that's one of the things I'm trying to improve is your reaction to those, because it's actually not your problem. And my standard answer these days is, what would you do? What do you think we should do?
Yeah.
What would you recommend? So that people actually then stop coming to you with just a problem. They come with a solution as well.
Yeah, 100%. If you could pay someone to do one of your chores, what chore would it be?
Well, our house at least has got a driveway that's about 40 or 50 metres long. So from my perspective, it'd be emptying the bins. So someone to take them down the road and someone to bring them up again, because that tends to be my gig on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, the long driveway. What's one word that you absolutely hate?
I don't like the word pivot.
Oh, yes. That's by far the most pivot and robust, I think, is what it is.
Pivot to me is another word for failure,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So,
we need to pivot, yeah. I actually catch myself saying it now, and I'm like, oh, no, just forget that I said the word pivot. What's the first thing you could do? This is a bit of a creepy question. What's the first thing that you could do if you became invisible?
Yeah, this could get really weird, couldn't it, this one? But I think it would be travelling first class on a plane, following Coldplay on a world tour.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I reckon that's what it'd be.
But you wouldn't want to be invisible, would you?
No, because you'd want the food and drink, wouldn't you?
Right, yeah,
100%. Yeah.
So what's the most useless talent that you have?
These go hand in hand. Air guitar and air drumming.
Listening to Coldplay.
And for Father's Day, I just received from the girls and Justine an electronic drum kit, so that I can actually turn it from air into real.
You can actually hit something.
Correct, yeah.
Brilliant.
And apparently it'll be a good workout for me at the same time.
Fabulous. What's your favourite Coldplay song, by the way?
Oh gosh, there is just so many.
Yeah.
I'm probably a big, if you go back, I was always a big fan of Yellow.
Yeah.
But there's so many. Like it appears in every Spotify playlist I've got.
Yeah, 100%.
Fix You's another good one, though.
Fix You's my favourite.
It's a pretty hard one to go past that.
Fix You is by far and away the song that I listen to.
I probably just need a little bit longer to think about that. I'd probably say that.
Yeah. And Scientist, I don't mind.
Oh, yeah, I reckon that's a ripper song, yeah. I'm just trying to think of the song that I've got on my alarm. But I also think this is a great song, Major Minus.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you know that one, but it's a ripper.
I'll probably know the song, but not by title, Major Minus. All right, beautiful. And last but not least, my favourite question of this whole podcast is, what's your best dad joke?
These are usually shockers, aren't they? And I cop absolute flogging from my family for most of these, most of them are sayings more than jokes. But if I had to say a joke, and this gets talked about inside the company from time to time, and Dean Waugh, who works for us, one of the War boys.
Oh, Dean, I used to play cricket against him.
Oh, yeah, you would have, absolutely.
He was
very
at
talented.
Kensington Browns. I was at West Torrens. Yeah.
Northline's still a sponsor of the Kensington Browns.
There you go, very good.
What's the best time to go to the dentist?
Oh, I don't know. I say
2:30.
2:30, yeah, brilliant. It's one I say to my daughters all the time. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Craig, for your time today. It's been a remarkable chat, a great journey. Your journey over the years is one, and your lessons that you've learned over the time. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been profound. Kudos to you and the team at Northline. 40 years. You can hang your hat on that. That's an amazing stuff. And we continue to watch you guys grow over the coming years.
Excellent. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you, and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.